So thank you all for coming. Today I'm going to be talking to you about some of my work examining the impact of non-binary and gender diverse characters on our attitudes and behaviors. And so we're seeing a lot of new children's television shows are representing non-binary and gender diverse characters. And what I mean here is characters that identify neither as men or women or boys and girls, and that are really gender expansive in their expression of their gender outside of the norms of the gender binary. And so why is that important? Why does it matter that there are new non-binary characters? And I'll argue that there are two big reasons. The first is that more and more kids are identifying as non-binary and gender diverse. And we know that if you have the opportunity to identify with a character that's represented positively, that's like you, it improves your self-esteem and self-efficacy. We also know that for non-binary children in particular, if we use appropriate pronouns, it validates their identity and increases their mental health outcomes. The second reason I think it's important that non-binary characters exist in kids' television is that previous research has shown that positive representation of girls and women, for example, can make us less sexist. And this may also be true for non-binary populations. And so I'm going to talk to you today about two children's shows. The first is Adventure Time, the second is Steven Universe. And I chose to do research with these two shows for a couple reasons. The first is that they're similar in a number of ways. So they're both fantasy series that are created explicitly for children. They have similar animation styles, and they also air on the same network. But these shows are also different in a number of ways that make for interesting comparison. So first, they differ in the number of non-binary characters that are in the show, as well as how those characters are represented. And then lastly, they differ in the level of non-binary gender theming is present in the content of the show. So considering these two shows, I was really interested in how shows with varying levels of gender diverse content could impact our attitudes and behaviors, and also if our own beliefs could influence or moderate, strengthen or weaken these types of media effects. And so I had 190 undergraduate participants in this study. They came into the lab, and first we gave them a survey to see what beliefs they already had about changing language and about sexism. And then they were randomly assigned to watch one of three shows, two of which I've already explained. And I also included a nature show as a control condition because that show has no non-binary content. After they watched the show, we asked them to give us a summary of the show. We told them that we just wanted to see what people remembered, but of course we were looking for something else. We actually analyzed those summaries for the types of language they were using around non-binary characters. And after they gave us a summary, we gave them another set of surveys on identifying sexist language and stereotypes. And so we did see that watching these shows could change people's attitudes. We saw an interaction effect between the show participants watched and the beliefs they already had coming into the lab. So some participants had less stereotyped attitudes after watching either Adventure Time or Steven Universe. And some participants were better able to recognize sexist language after watching Steven Universe in particular. But this was only the case for participants who already had progressive beliefs. So they already thought language should be less gendered and recognized that sexism was real. We did also observe changes in behavior. So we saw a main effect of condition here, that people who watched Steven Universe, the show with the most diverse non-binary content, were more likely to use they, them pronouns toward non-binary characters. We also got to capture something interesting and exciting, in my opinion. In those summaries, we got to observe people actively thinking about their behavior and about what pronoun they should use. So here's a picture of the character Stevani, who is non-binary, being harassed by this character Kevin. And people would say things like, yeah, Stevani, she doesn't, Stevani doesn't really like hanging out with Kevin. And so they were really actively constructing and interpreting gender salient information, or the lack thereof, which really provides evidence that television consumption is not a passive process. And it's also not subject to the same effects for everyone. Our beliefs may actually influence these media effects. I also think this work tells us something interesting about this kind of experimental paradigm, because we found these effects after participants watched only one 20-minute episode, which is really remarkable. But it also makes me think about future work and if long-term exposure to these kinds of shows and characters might shift attitudes for people with more conservative beliefs. I'd also like to replicate this work in the future with children, since these shows are created for this audience, and also kids in early adolescence are really starting to become flexible in their thinking around gender. I'd also really love to work with media practitioners and content creators to make sure that this and future generations of children get to see diverse and dynamic and inclusive children's television. I want to thank you all for coming and everyone involved in this project, and I'm happy to answer any questions.